Welcome, welcome. This is the Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe is out for the day. He's got some pressing matters. It happens. It's why it's great to have two guys on the show, because sometimes I need a day out and sometimes Joe needs a day out. I've got some pretty good stuff loaded and ready for you. I'm going to do much of the hour is going to be a video that I want to play, and I'm actually going to kind of merge this into the half-empty cup of Joe in Colorado. So if you're listening in Arizona, I'm going to be playing Lynette Zhang. Lynette Zhang is actually a little bit of what we're going to play today is her reaction to the Great Taking. And this guy David Webb wrote a book, and then he did a video to make it simpler for people who don't like to read books. In the half-empty cup of Joe, I'm going to play the Great Taking, David Webb. It's he tried to keep upbeat, but it's almost as dire as the things that Joe and I say on the air. It might be even a little more dire, because this guy was deep into Wall Street and the inner workings of the financial system way back in the 80s and so on, and now lives, I think, in Switzerland or something on a farm, and is completely out of the system. So when you're thinking of why you buy gold and silver, you're going to get a lot from Lynette Zhang, and you're going to get a lot from David Webb. And if you're in Arizona, or if you're listening to this at 1360khnc.com, you just stay here into the next couple hours. Or if you're listening to 1010 KXXT in Arizona, if you have access on your phone or your computer to go to 1360khnc.com, there'll be the David Webb, the Great Taking. I'm going to try to get I think I can get the whole thing in on that 2-hour program with the commercials. But here is gold and silver. Before I get into Lynette Zhang, the number to call to buy gold and silver, we have the ladies in Arizona ready to take your calls. It's 800-951-0592. I would say never a more important time to start getting in possession of things and start being wary of debt, especially. I'm not a big fan of paper markets. I understand how stocks work, how bonds work, and these other things. I just feel the safest place for savings is always going to be gold and silver. It reacts to the amount of fiat currency flying around. The more that's out there, the higher the price. And gold should be much higher than it is now. And I think we're coming up into a time where things are going to readjust. Lynette Zhang is going to talk a little bit about that. And you're going to want to be heavy in this. So today I got a special. I'm going to announce a special now. I'll announce it maybe a little later in the show. We have only 30. This is just for today only. There's only 30 of these available. It's fractional gold. It's pre-30 gold, pre-30s gold, pre-33 gold. Lynette Zhang, also, this is what she buys. She had an uncle who, back when gold was illegal to own, held 3,000 ounces of this stuff when it was only legal to own 5 ounces. Well, it was legal to own this type of gold. And where do you think she got her education from? His uncle was doing really good. When they made gold legal again in the 80s, he was already sitting in a great spot as things started changing. So these $5 liberties on the website, it's $5.85. I'm selling these 30 that I have in our possession for $575. The first come, first serve on the 30 of these. We do have a handful of those Silver Eagles that we tried selling yesterday for $5.90 a roll. I think there's 18 rolls. I don't answer the phones. It could be less. That's first come, first serve also. $590 for a roll of Silver Eagles. That's an outstanding price on both those items. The number is 800-951-0592. The Great Taking. I'm gonna play a minute or two of this before we hit the commercial break. We'll hit the commercial break, and we'll continue on with Lynette Zhang as she's reacting a little bit to the Great Taking. The Great Taking is a video that was sent to me by many of the listeners here in Colorado. I would say I got it. I don't follow everything David Webb says, but man, is he on it. He has the experience. So Lynette Zhang's reaction to this, because she talks a lot more about why this means you got to buy gold. So this is why I'm going to put it on this show. Here's a little bit of Lynette Zhang before we hit the break.
I'm Lynette Zhang, Chief Market Analyst at ITM Trading, and I would like to welcome you to the new year. Can't believe it's 2024, and what an interesting year this is most likely to be. There are a lot of things that I see coming up, but definitely the great taking is one of them. So what's this book about? And by the way, I think Taylor Kenny is coming out also with a video on this on Sunday, since so many people wanted to talk about it. And what this does is just kind of put in small format size what we've been talking about for years and years and years. And what is the Great Reset but a shift in the collateral from the many to the few? What's inflation? A shift from the many to the few. So this is really what we've been talking about. Now, what is this book about? It's the taking of collateral. Globally synchronized debt accumulation super cycle, which is what has been engineered by the central banks by consistently lowering interest rates. At the peak, they were at intraday, I think it was 21 and change interest, down to zero, and was held at zero for 15 years. But it includes, this great taking includes all financial assets, all the money on deposit in the banks, all stocks and bonds, and hence all underlying property of all public corporations. And I know that this can seem outrageous, but the difference between inflation and hyperinflation is simply the speed of that inflation. If it happens slowly, it still happens. You just don't notice it.
There you go. She just started with the 0% interest. And, hey, she's talking about, well, the debt. So we'll get further into this. Stay with us. 800-951-0592. $5 Liberties, $5.75. Only 30 of them. Welcome back. Patriot Radio News Hour, 800-951-0592. Like I said in the first segment, $5 Liberties, first come, first serve. We have 30 of them as of the beginning of the show. $575. It's a quarter ounce of gold. Great place to be. And a few remaining rolls of the Silver Eagles for $590. 800-951-0592. Let's continue on with Lynette Zhang and the Great Taking.
Privately owned personal and real property financed with any amount of debt will be similarly taken, as will the assets of privately owned businesses which have been financed with debt. And keep in mind that if you owe somebody money on that collateral and you can't pay it, guess what? They're going to take that collateral away from you. Private, closely held control of all central banks and hence of all money creation has allowed a very few people to control all political parties, governments, their intelligence agencies, major corporations, and of course the media. And everything, we have a semblance or an image of choice, but in reality, everything is owned by a very few people. And these entities have been consolidating over the years, the banks particularly since 2000. When a bank fails, the good assets go to the few, and then the bad assets are absorbed by the many, the taxpayers, right? So by controlling the narrative, that's that perception management where they want to control how you think and therefore how you move into and through a circumstance. And it's easier to get people to cooperate with deception because once you know the truth, you make different choices. And that takes away some level of their control. And remember, we vote with our wallets and we vote with our purses. And so this is my vote. It's out of the system. And as the Bank for International Settlements so aptly states, gold, physical gold in your possession is the only financial asset that does not run counterparty risk. Therefore, does not risk the loss of that collateral. Money is an extremely efficient control system if you have everybody bought into the same system, because all they have to do is push a button and create devaluation. And they can even do that by decree pretty easily. So keep that in mind. Money is an extremely efficient control system. If you are dependent upon the money that you earn from the system, by design, you are earning less and less over time through inflation. Remember, they knew two key pieces when they set the system up. Number one was that people marry the legal money of the state. And they cannot help but think that at some point it must regain some of its former glory, which it never does, because by design, being debt-based and the interest you have to pay on that debt and the ability of central banks to print us into oblivion. See, there's lots and lots of data on this. It is the same old story over and over again, which also means that there are repeatable patterns that if you can learn how to see them, you can make different choices and not be subject to this great taking. And then finally, the money control system breaks down at the end of a monetary supercycle with collapse in the velocity of money. So let's examine that. This is something that we've talked about a lot, and it's also something I said, when this shift occurs in a pervasive way, then I believe we will be at the beginning of the hyperinflationary cycle. So we're going to look at that right now. And what you're looking at here is the M2, the money supply. It's not the total money supply. They took that away from us, the M3 in 2006. But the M2 we'll just use as a proxy. And you can see how much and how quickly we have printed money into oblivion. But look at what we're facing right now, which is a decline in the M2. So money is actually, when they're tightening, do you see anything that looks like that leading up to this point? And this is from 1960. And that would be an absolute no. So notice the deflationary shift in the money supply. This is a pattern shift. It is an indication. Even if you don't know what it means, it doesn't really matter. What this tells you is things have changed or are changing or in the process of changing. This is a heads up that we have entered a new part, and I think the beginning of the hyperinflation, even though the IMF came out and said, oh, look at this, the Fed has engineered a soft landing. Oh, zippity-doo-dah, great day. This is not over yet, and the IMF is just doing their job, which is to keep you comfortable and keep you in the system. It ain't over yet. It ain't over by a mile yet, because this debt supercycle is over and the central banks popped it themselves. Now, what you're looking at here is the velocity of the money supply. And it was in 1997 when we hit our peak right there. And you can see how much that has declined. And I tried to line this up so that you could see that one is coordinated with
So she's showing the money creation, and if you've been paying attention, during COVID, 40% of all the money printed in circulation was done just in 2020. I've heard numbers as high now because we don't really know what money they're putting into circulation. As of the FOIA request in 2022, Glenn Beck exposed how they printed $29 trillion to fix the housing bubble when they said it was $5 billion. But So 40 to 80% of all the money that's circulating around has been done since 2020. So the velocity chart shows this line going straight upward, okay? And then just suddenly, it just fish hooks right back down here recently. That's the tightening that's going on. When it comes to the velocity of money, and Lynette Zeng does a good job explaining this, the velocity of money is how much that money is moving around. And in 1997, it was really moving. But after that, it just dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped right off a cliff, to where the money's not moving around, and this is getting to be a indication of a huge change that's coming, because at the same point where the money supply is fish hooking down just a little bit, the velocity of money, which has crashed since 1997, has fish hooked up. So things are going to change. So let's listen to Lynette Zeng explain.
The other. because up until the recent shift, no matter how much money they pushed into the system, the velocity of money, the number of times that money changes hands has been plummeting. So it's like pushing on a string, and it takes more. And we've seen this certainly through all of the money printing in the QE. No matter how much more they did, it really didn't move the envelope enough. And it's like any other kind of drug. The more you take, the more you need just to feel normal. So the more that it's taken of the money printing to make things appear normal, but they're not normal. And now you can see this shift where money is changing hands a lot more quickly. Part of that is due to the inflation that we've been experiencing. You know, if they can keep it at 2%, then they're still getting a decline in the purchasing power value of the currency, but you don't notice it. You don't make changes in asking for more money from your job or even in the choices that you make and how you spend your money. But when inflation happens noticeably, you start to make the different changes. And you can see from here that changes are definitely being made. And I want you to notice something, okay? This peak hit in the first quarter of 22. Well, when did the shift in money spending happen? And that was in the third quarter of 2021. So the shift had already taken place with more money chasing fewer goods. And this is why I'm telling you, hey, I could be wrong, right? This is not something that's within my control. But I've been in these markets on some level since 1964. And I've been a stockbroker, I've been a banker, I've paid attention to currencies and the life cycle of currencies since 1987. And I'm telling you, we are at the end. There's no doubt in my mind. That's why I've done everything that I've done with my urban farm and the bug out location and everything else. No more procrastinating. If you haven't clicked that Calendly link yet and set up a time to get your own personal strategy in place, I suggest you do it today, now, this moment, because I can't tell you when all choices will be lost. We're seeing spot over $2,000 an ounce. It's still dirt cheap to its fundamental value. So again, it bottomed, the monetary velocity bottomed in Q3 of 2021, and then we saw the shift after that in Q1 of 2022 in the money that's in the system. Personally, I think the hyperinflation has already begun. And all of this is smoke and mirrors that you're seeing around there. The IMF coming out and saying, oh, look at the Fed. Oh, no recession. We have not felt how bad this is going to be. But the more they protest, he thinks they protest too much.
So there you go. That's the beginning. I am going to skip part of this. It's a pretty long video. If you ever want to look it up, it's on YouTube. You can look up Lynette Zhang, the Great Taking, Understanding. But I'm going to push forward because I only got so much showtime, and I wanted to get to where she basically goes into a lot of gold 101. You know, why you hold gold, why it protects you against inflation, why people are understanding that having fears of their financial futures with this inflation that's going on. But then she goes into the future, what's getting ready to happen, and I've talked a little bit about a guy named Javier Milei who ran for president in Argentina, and he's looking like he's going to try to change things. At least he said some strong things. Well, interestingly enough, hang on one second. Interestingly enough, some of the things that he wants to do to possibly make things better is possibly going to make things worse on the front end before things get better. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. But the things that he's doing is actually going to make things so much worse, and it's actually going to hurt the people. And that's because if you try to change the financial system that's in place to something more fair, it's definitely damaging to make that maneuver. But Lynette Zhang is not really too concerned about crapping on Javier Milei and the government. She's more focused on what they're going to be doing, and she is correct on what Javier Milei is doing and what the government's trying to get themselves out of hyperinflation. We're going to be in a similar position soon, which is why Lynette Zhang is telling you got to get ready.
Enable income and wealth inequality. Make no mistake. Argentina. I want to talk a bit about Argentina because it's a great example of what is coming in our relatively near future. I can't tell you exactly when, but it's coming. Argentina's Milei starts shock therapy by devaluing the peso by 50%. Wow, that's pretty shocking. Shock therapy, I already did that. Who does this really hurt? Who's really shocked the most? People that don't sit in gold. I'm going to show you that in a second. But your salary in the private sector, in the public sector, in the popular, in social and solidary economy, in the cooperative or informal sector, for retirees and pensioners, you will get half in the supermarket.
She's talking about all you guys that are out there doing traditional finance is possibly going to be in a really bad position when things go to shift. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Patriot Radio. You can erase that. Yeah, take that out, Jack. The Patriot Radio News Hour. This is Jason solo today. Joe's had some business. We're having Lynette Zhang talk about some changes that are getting ready to happen. Just a reminder, we do have two specials today. I started the show with $35 liberties. Those are only $575, first come, first serve. I don't actually know the status of those. I'm solo today, so I'm trying to run the show and everything else solo today. So it's a little harder, but we also have $590 for rolls of Silver Eagle. So get on that as quickly as possible. There's only 18 rolls left of that special. 800-951-0592. I'm going to continue on with Lynette Zhang. She was talking about Javier Milei. Argentina is switching their financial policy, but as they're having this inflation, they have tremendous inflation. They devalue the peso first. They want to move to the dollar, but maybe good things happening. But what Lynette Zhang is focusing on is like, well, how do you curb the hyperinflation, the inflation that we're probably heading towards, that we're having an immense amount of? Check it out.
Do you really think that people are not going to protest? Are we on the verge of a global revolt? That's my hope. I mean, I hope that it is a nonviolent revolt, and we can do that just by voting with our wallets, just by buying gold and silver and getting your wealth out of the system, or at least get it properly balanced, so that if everything you hold in the stock market and the bond market goes away, this goes up, and so you have maintained your wealth. Again, if you have not clicked that Calendly link and gotten your strategy in place, get it in place, and the sooner the better. Because by design, when they do this, it's those that are not holding gold. So the most vulnerable, that are the ones that suffer the most. Just keep in mind, you vote with your wallet. Food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. You got to have these things in order to sustain a reasonable standard of living. And I've got to remind you of this, because how can they take all of this wealth? And read the book. It was a great read. And like I said, Taylor's going to break it down even further. But I wanted to remind you of really who legally owns all of these fiat money assets, because it's not you. The legal owner is up here at the top, and it's Seed and Company, DTCC. And who owns that but all this small banking conglomerates? They're the ones that own it. They're the legal registered owner. That's the only owner that is acknowledged at court. You are way down here on the bottom. So you make all of those deposits and take all of those risks, but everybody between here, you're just the beneficial owner, and so is everybody in between.
So in the next hour, on Half Empty Cup of Joe, and I'm going to play David Webb discussing this, what Lynette Zhang is talking about. You're going to be talking about the Depository Trust Company made in 1973 and the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, which showed up essentially in 1999, 2003 kind of time frame, essentially a seed and company, something else is mentioned. These entities first turned all the stock from being a paper, having a paper recognition of what you own, to all being digital and then securing all of it. It's all there. It may move from you to somebody else when you're selling a stock, but it's actually being held by the Depository Trust Company and the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. And this is scary stuff, because if things change rapidly and they have control of the securities, you may be in a bad position. And Lynette Zhang will talk a little bit about that.
So when they're talking about that great taking, that's why all of that collateral is vulnerable, because it's done on debt. And even, let's talk about residential real estate for a minute. Let's say your house is paid off, which a lot of people's homes are paid off, thank goodness. So you're saying, well, I'm not doing that on debt. But cities, states, municipalities, how do they generate income? Taxes. And real estate is immovable. You cannot put it on your back and walk away with it and go somewhere else. So you have to make sure that you have, and I don't do it with this, there's another tool that I use. I do it with gold. There's different kinds of gold. There's different levels of gold, depending upon what you need to accomplish. But the strategy that we execute can determine the most likely amount of gold in the different forms that you need to be able to pay off your mortgage, pay your property taxes, etc. So it's critically important that you get this and you get into place as quickly as you can, because as I showed you in the monetary velocity chart, things are shifting. Things are changing. And we don't know the exact moment when all choice will be lost. But what we do know, thanks to this Yale law study, is that you are not the legal registered owner of those fiat money products. And you can only convert them back into this garbage, right? Which means that when all confidence in the currency is gone, you have nothing. Nothing. And are you ready to work from scratch again? Because if what they have in mind they get to pull off, yeah. The reality is, if you don't hold it, you don't own it, and all of that collateral that's been used by God knows how many companies between you and the legal owner, think back to 2008. What happened was disgusting, evil, despicable, and everything else. But who went to jail? No one. Because they're the ones that write these contracts on this stuff. And you don't read the contracts, but the reality is you got to hold it. You got to own it. And gold is the only financial asset that runs no counterparty risk. Everything else is counterparty risk and is being used as collateral, which will evaporate from one hand to the other. Remember, wealth never disappears. It merely shifts location. And I've had people question, well, Lynette, how do you know that they're going to revalue the currency against gold? Well, number one, because gold is the primary currency metal. And we've been watching global central banks amass more gold than they ever have since tracking of how much they're accumulating began. They're getting ready for resetting the currencies. Number two, because gold is 100% functionality and 100% intrinsic value. And I know that I'm repetitive with a lot of this stuff, but that's because it takes the normal person at least 7 times of hearing the same thing before it begins to make sense. This is all intrinsic value because it is used in every single sector of the global economy, and they have never been able to recreate its attributes in a lab. So gold, and the same thing can be said for silver. So gold and silver have the broadest base of buyer and the broadest base of functionality. And if you're going to reset something that has absolutely zero value, you reset it against something that's all value. And gold has been proven over and over and over again to have the confidence of the masses. You look no further than what's happening in Zimbabwe with them issuing gold coins and trying to do a gold-backed CBDC.
There you go. We're going to have a little more of Lynette Zhang. 800-951-0592. Pretty good case to be buying gold and silver and doing it right away. We'll be right back. 800-951-0592. Gold and silver, great place to be when markets start to do the crazy stuff that I think they're going to show in 2024 and beyond. Today's special, $5 Liberties for $575. We started the show with only 30. They could be sold out. I haven't gotten a message that they are, so should have some available. And we have less than 18 rolls of Silver Eagles at $590. 800-951-0592. I want to get through Lynette Zhang because at the end she really has some good stuff. So let's continue on.
Which is cloudier, okay? But they know that all confidence in that currency is lost because of the ongoing hyperinflation. Because they don't change behavior, but they don't change behavior here or anywhere. They just change how they account for that behavior. But going back to what we said in the beginning, with the normal public being really disillusioned because their experience is too in your face now. They see it too much and too easily. And that's my hope, is that enough people wake up, vote with their wallets, make sure that they have food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter so that they can sustain a reasonable standard of living. We can come together in community and say no. And as we've been learning from the gains and the wins from the unions, when enough people come together, they got to hear our voices. So that's my hope. But let's go back to here because this is the reset, right? And this is the US dollar versus the Argentinian peso. Okay? So you can say, well, look, Lynette, they revalued the Argentinian peso against the dollar, and look at the dollar went ba-bam, straight up. That's on 12/13, so just a couple weeks ago. So look, doesn't that mean that the dollar is good? Well, again, have you been out to eat lately? Have you been to the grocery store lately? So you're trading one fiat for the other, and it's the simple fact that the Argentinian peso was devalued overnight, and the US dollar was devalued, well, with the inflation heating up, that's what made it noticeable. But if they can keep it under that radar, you stay in it and you don't realize it. And it really is like a spring. If you hold the spring down, because this is the suppression of gold prices to its true fundamental value, you hold that spring down. When you release that spring, it shoots in a direction. And this is still not the spring. I'm going to keep looking, but it shoots in a direction. Monetary revaluations always have to be against more stable money. So at the moment, the dollar is a bit more stable than the peso, right? If I walk into your house every night over 30 years and I take one button, at the end of 30 years, I'm going to have an awful lot of your buttons, but you're probably not going to notice. If I go in tonight and take 95% of your buttons, tomorrow when you go to get dressed, you're probably going to notice that. That's the difference between inflation and hyperinflation. That's also the difference between revaluing one currency against another currency, which is a smokescreen, so that you don't know what's going on, and revaluing it against gold, because all you have to do is look at the purchasing power of the US dollar to see how much that's declined. And it's only going to get worse, as I showed you in the monetary velocity. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. And I'm not usually wrong about those things because I've been living in this arena forever. My job is not to keep you in the system. My job is to get you to protect yourself from what they intend to do, because the more of us that understand what's happening and move forward appropriately, the more power we have collectively. We have to come together in community, because that's not getting better. Now, this is spot gold versus the Argentinian peso. And in reality, gold, physical gold, is still worth a whole lot more than that. But you can see that it has the same kind of initial price action to a 50% revaluation. Can you see it? But physical gold is simply the most stable money there is. And if you want to know the US dollar to the physical gold market, I keep showing you that, which is making new highs, especially where the 1%ers live in the ultra rarities. So what are you going to do, right? What do you want to go into this reset with? You want to go into it with dollars, and this is supposed to be, I don't know, the best horse in the glue factory, right? Because here's the opportunity if you hold your purchasing power, and this is what I really wanted to talk to you about today. Because Milei sets up Argentina privatizations. Privatizations mean that they're going to sell off assets that the government holds to the public. Like, I don't know, let's say the official and the chief police station. They're going to sell them off because they need the money, and then they're going to turn around and lease them back for you because they need the police station. Right? You see what I'm saying? So opportunities are coming. This is not the time to be doing this, and your pockets are likely not deep enough for this yet. But history has shown us over and over again that these opportunities there'll be so much of it if you can take advantage of them. Again, wealth never disappears, it just shifts location.
Yeah, essentially she's saying you'll be able to do a whole lot in a future time with a little bit of gold. I remember for a time period in Venezuela where they were selling entire homes for like an ounce or two of gold. She's saying that is a very likely possibility in some level here in America when things get crazy. 800-951-0592. I'll be right back for the last segment. 800-951-0592. Take advantage of these $5 liberties for $575 each. It's $10 off the regular price at the website. And $590 is probably the last day on these Silver Eagles. 800-951-0592. I'm trying to get to the end. Lynette Zhang has some pretty good stuff in the last few minutes as we get to the end of the show.
So start looking at, what would I like to own? Because by the time we see that cup formation on the bottom, when things have bottomed out, and I'm going to show you that, because I'm going to show you when I'm starting to shift some of my gold holdings into these income-producing assets when they are undervalued. Right now, you have gold down here, you have those other income-producing assets up here, but that's going to flip-flop. And once we see that cup formation, that's when we're going to start to convert somewhere near a bottom. And frankly, if I ever get you in at a bottom or out at a top, that's luck. I'm never really looking to do that. But I know how to read the signs, and that's what we want to do. So, repeal rules. So what they're doing in order to privatize and be able to sell to private entities, private corporations,
in Argentina,
that they repeal the rules that impede the privatization of state companies, listing the reforms in bullet points. He added that all state businesses would have their legal structure changed to fully clear the path to privatization. That's going to happen here as well. With his privatization push, Milei mimics a similar policy pursued by ex-president blah, 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 the market-friendly leader of the 1990s, who sold several strategic assets in an attempt to downsize government after a period of hyperinflation. This is a repetitive pattern. You want to be in the right place at the right time with the right asset.
Gold.
This is what puts you in that possession. Because again, I cannot repeat this enough. Wealth never disappears, it just shifts location. If you bought a stock at 100 and it's sitting at $1, that wealth didn't disappear. It just went to the person that sold you that stock at 100. Same thing with all of these real estate assets. Now, what's going to survive? Because we're going through a complete transformation of the financial system, the social system, and the monetary system. We don't know that yet, but we will moving into the future. We will absolutely know. And when we see that, the smart money has begun to accumulate, like we've seen the global central bankers do with gold. That's when we make our shift, and we do it strategically. So you should be thinking about that now, so that when the time comes, you're ready. But if you want to be ready, what you should be doing is accumulating gold. And there are different kinds of gold. So you want to accumulate, in my opinion, and what I've done personally, not what I think you should do, but what I've done personally, is I want to own the kind of gold that is least likely to be taken away from you. Or even if you say, well, I'm not going to turn in my gold, I want the kind of gold that legally I can use in the normal marketplace to take advantage of these opportunities that are coming. Thank you, Uncle Al. Seriously, thank you, Uncle Al. Because he was holding at least 3,000 ounces of gold when it was in the right form.
Pre-33 gold is what she's talking about. Thanks for listening today. 800-951-0592. But if you want to switch over to 1360khnc.com, I'm going to have David Webb's Great Taking, which is a lot of what Lynette Zhang was talking about on her bit that I played here. So switch on over, and we'll be back tomorrow. Joe and I will be back tomorrow.